the talk that we're doing today is what the foundations of health.
Yeah. So this is actually a really cool talk. Dr. Wallace actually really was excited to do this one because this is kind of his baby, we'll say. He created an amazing handout for our clients to come in because we were seeing a lot of simple changes that could be made in an individual's health. And so he took it upon himself, because he's fantastic at that, and decided to create a really cool foundation handout that we actually are going to be providing on our website, but also that we're going to discuss today with you all so that you can kind of get a gist of what we feel our foundations are. Just an FYI. Now, of course, this is all starting, but you can give a call into our show. The phone number is 844-390-8255. Again, 844-390-8255 if you'd like to ask questions. Yep. And our lovely producer will handle all of that. Mm-hmm.
And if we have to, if it's something more in depth, then if you leave your contact information, we can obviously contact you, answer them more thoroughly.
Absolutely.
Obviously over and over the radio, that's like we can give some advice, but if it's something more in depth, we definitely need to hear the full context of your symptoms.
Absolutely.
And so, a great leading by Dr. Sundermeyer. So the foundation. So we would both see a lot of people that would come in from a lot of other physicians, and they've been either seen physicians or obviously a new patient. And they sometimes want to start with a lot of the extravagant, sometimes medicine that we can do here, i.e. peptide therapy, fertility. But these people wouldn't have the foundational aspects of health somewhat taken care of. And it's the same concept of having a house that's on a very bad foundation. The house is going to be crooked and the roof might be off or anything like that. So we really like to start with the foundational components, because with that being fully now taken care of, now when we add in different modalities, there's better efficacy with the treatment, and also the patient starts to feel better in regards to just the overall symptoms. They actually will go ahead and feel better just with the foundational components, just in general. And then everything that we want to do possibly IV wise has a much better, like I said, treatment aspect to the patient. So they have to sometimes even pay less money because they're actually getting seen, they're actually getting results. Mm-hmm. And these are things that you can do technically without money.
Which is lovely. So you gotta appreciate the fact that this is something you can do in your own home. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to integrative medicine today. Unfortunately, a lot of insurance companies don't always cover. So we do our best when it comes to that realm of medicine to be cognizant of what can you do on your own in your home. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, what with the 5 foundations we'll be discussing today, they follow through obviously water, right? Mm-hmm. So water is our first, and I think a really important topic today to really move into. And so with water, Dr. Wallace, what are your biggest deficiencies that you see with patients?
Well, coming from, obviously we treat here in Tucson, and so almost everybody is chronically dehydrated. And so there's a great book written, Body's Many Cries for Waters, and I forgot the doctor's name of it.
I believe it's Dr. Batman Galidi. Yeah, yes. I apologize. Correct. But yeah, your body's many cries for water.
Mm-hmm. And so he basically has a lot of these disease processes that starts with chronic dehydration and how that basically interferes with our body's biochemistry, how certain hormones will increase because of all that stress. And so water obviously is needed because every biochemical process in our body needs water.
Yeah.
And so if those, go ahead.
No, go for it.
And so if those processes can continue, well, then what is either sped up, slowed down, or out of sequence with other areas in the body? And obviously that's called homeostasis. And mm-hmm. so I learned a long time ago that there's no new processes in the body. They're either sped up, out of sequence, or slowed down. And so mm-hmm. if we're dehydrated, what kind of things are sped up, slowed down, or obviously out of sequence with everything else?
Well, and I think something that a lot of people don't ever think about in our body is everything is transported in our system. Like mm-hmm. think about all the roads in a city. It's water in our body. And so the better circulation we have, thanks to better hydration, right? Just in that basic foundation, the better your red blood cells will circulate through your body, the better the minerals in your body, like magnesium, will get transported from point A to point B. So
Correct.
I think we forget about just like, sometimes I feel like the best analogy to use with my patients I see is that it's like a city. Imagine if everything was just stopped or so slow. How frustrated would you be? How late would you be? Well, that's kind of what's going on with your body. These processes are slow and things are happening inappropriately.
Correct. So when we tell someone, it's like, great, we want you to take these supplements. We want you to go ahead and do these other types of things, even exercise. So we want you to exercise. Well, if you're dehydrated, our body sits there and understands biochemistry. Well, I don't want you to exercise because you might sweat, and I don't want you to sweat. And so now we're lethargic or we're having chronic fatigue. And it's like, so, it's one avenue that obviously needs to be taken care of.
Absolutely. Well, and moving into that, I think something that a lot of people don't think about is the morning beverage is always coffee, right? I mean, how many of you, right, wake up and drink coffee in the morning? I think I'll raise my hand, right? But the first thing that I do is I drink at least 10 ounces, 12 ounces of water before I've done anything. I mean, I on average sleep 8 hours a night, maybe 10 sometimes if I'm lucky to sleep in, Saturdays is my favorite day of the week. But if I've gone 8 to 10 hours without any hydration, and depending on the individual, maybe we've also woken up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, how much hydration have we lost?
Correct.
And so, I mean, waking up and trying to start my morning with a little bit of hydration versus coffee or green tea or black tea with dehydration, you've already started a better circulation in your system that day, better energy during the day, cognition can be better. So I think that that's really cool. With water, Dr. Wallace, there's multiple applications, right? So, I mean, what we're thinking, filtered water is obviously what we always encourage individuals, but there's also RO and alkaline.
So, obviously everybody knows the water from most municipalities are obviously probably toxic. And so I think both myself and Dr. Sundermeyer are a big firm believer in keeping things as simple as possible. So if you have an RO system, you can put into your house that's cost $1,000 or whatever, great. But sometimes just a simple water filter. I use zero water filter. It's one of the ones that I use. And it's like it has been tested to remove some of those components.
Yeah.
And so again, no, it's all right. So we always wanted to have people try to drink as clean as you can. And obviously, which Dr. Sundermeyer might have said, it's like you have to stay away from plastics. The soft plastics will absolutely destroy us because of the phthalates and other chemicals that are in the soft plastic. So you have to imagine they're bottled, they're transported in plastic. They're never transported cool. They're transported in a hot container. They might be sitting outside, all that stuff, and all those things leach out into the water. And great, you're having water, but now you're actually treating yourself, like I said, to the lovely chemicals that happen to be within that water.
Yeah, plastic tea. I actually have an interesting story about that as we move into our next subject. So when I was much younger, going into college, I worked for a pretty nice resort. And that resort actually stored its water in the loading dock, which in Arizona, a loading dock is,
it's like,
I mean, how hot would you say it is if outside it's 115, how hot would a loading dock be? You know what I mean?
Correct, so around all the cement and all that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we never know where plastic, I mean, and granted, when in doubt, yes, drink your water, but when you can be cognizant, when you can be aware, when you can take your, stainless steel container out, glass container out, use that if and when at all possible. There's a really great website if you want to look at your filter. It's the EWG. We have no affiliation, but that's the company that we utilize to evaluate our water filter. So you can take a look at your Pure, your Brita, etc.
Yeah. And so there's, the EWG, as well as I do believe the one that we suggest, the zero water filter, if you put that in, and they can actually put in your zip code, and I will check to see if your chromium 6 is high or prevalent within your table or within your water system. And so obviously everybody knows Aaron Brockovich. Made that famous, but you can actually go to there and put in your zip code, and it will actually have the statistics in regards to the chromium-6 that you have.
Perfect.
And then obviously water, everybody, the typical thing is half your body weight in ounces, but that's the starting point. If you're in Arizona and you're a triathlete, if you're out just mowing the yard on a regular basis, you probably want to go ahead and drink more of that. Obviously, your urine should be somewhat clear. If it looks like apple juice, then it's like you probably have some issues with dehydration, minus some of the minerals or the vitamins that we take that should make your urine, neon yellow.
Nice, bright.
Yeah.
Well,
Nice
moving on there. So with that, obviously you can't have water without your food, right? The other base foundation when it comes to our nutrients and what we put in our body. And so today I'd say how many diets we'll say, or fads, fad diets do we have going today with health? I can think of 3. We have, obviously keto is huge right now, and paleo, right?
Correct.
Any others that you can think of that are in there?
Well, it's like we have a carnivore, which I just found from a patient, and I'm like, okay, I like that to a standpoint. So again, I think one size does not fit all. I think if there's a certain symptom that you have, like cancer, keto, because we want to get rid of sugar, but our bodies do need carbohydrate. And so again, I think both Dr. Sundermeyer and I want to have educated people. So it's like, here's good choices, and then here's bad choices. If you had a flip chart and it's like you had fast food, or if that, through your day, you had to rip open a box or rip open plastic, and that was your food. In that regards, it's probably not going to be the most healthy. The caveat is the one that is the most studied is the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And so that has the most studies backing in regards to longevity, less heart. And so I'm not against keto and I'm not against paleo in that regards. So if you need to contact me, you can contact me, but I'm not against those. I'm just against the concept that it's like, as a patients, when they walk in off the street and they have no clue about what to do, it's like, let's start with some basics. And I think Dr. Sundermeyer does this as well. It's like, if we look through your diary and it feels like you're having no vegetables, I'm not going to change everything. It's like, let's just add in one extra bowl of vegetables. And as you start to build upon those healthy habits, then you'll start to feel better. And then you yourself will probably start to sit there and go, well, okay, let's get rid of all the other stuff.
And I think that's the one deficiency that I do see in a lot of my diet diaries when I'm reviewing them with my patients is that, I know that vegetables don't always taste the greatest. You definitely have to be a creative chef or home cook to really make them taste great. I had Brussels sprouts recently at an amazing restaurant. And I was like, wow, I could have bowls of these, but at home I would never be able to pull that off. But if you're not even getting a cup of vegetables every day, where do you think your nutrition is going to be in the grand scheme of things? And I think a lot more people, I think this was actually the coolest thing a patient told me recently, is that she started trying to get better nutrition from her food because she realized she was taking so many supplements. She was reliant on her supplements, which, depending on where you get them, could be full of a lot of inappropriate nutrients. But she was reliant solely on the pills she was taking every day to get what she could get from a lot of her food. And so just trying to shift that mentality over into, wow, this is what a plate should look like. I always goal for people that 40 to 50% of your plate and or bowl should be full of a vegetable and not corn. I always remind people corn is not a vegetable, so that does not count. And obviously there's legumes and then grains, which again don't count either. So your dark leafy greens, your asparagus, your cauliflower. So be conscious of that. I think my favorite part of talking to people is eat your greens or pretty colored vegetables.
Correct. Yeah. Eat the rainbow because every color has a different antioxidant that helps obviously help with different abilities. So everybody knows, oxidative stress, free radicals. Well, what's quenched is obviously eating our vegetables from different myriad of colors. Right. And so if we understand this, like red has resveratrol, these different types of things, we can actually sit there and start to eat those types of things and actually affect our body. because same thing. It's like Dr. Sundermeyer and I, it's like, obviously we have to supplement people, but
Mm-hmm.
man, it's like, I don't know, we do consulting in California, and unfortunately the doctor that was there before us had people on like 20 different things. And it's like, I can't take that. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way. I mean, that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yep.
And then we would take over the patient's case and have them do a diet diary and find out that the only time they had a vegetable was at dinner time. And then it's like a piece of, like you said, corn or peas. It's like, no, breakfast, the typical American, which I am, I grew up, is eggs and bacon and pancakes, which I still love. I
I
know
think
I still eat, but it's like, it's okay to actually have a bowl of vegetables possibly in the morning time.
I actually proved that this morning. I had sauteed spinach
was awesome.
with tomato and avocado and black beans. It was a very interesting breakfast for me for sure this morning, but I'm moving into my own little juice fast. So, but I think a basic goal though for vegetable intake for the average individual should be what, like, I don't know, at a minimum 2 to 3 cups a day, right?
Correct. Yeah. So if your coffee cup is a certain size, which I always tell people, unless you have the big goblet, in that regards, at least, like I said, fill that up in your brain 2 to 3 times per day. And that's what you should technically be having. And obviously variety is the key. Mm-hmm. And depending on if you have a sensitivity to a certain vegetable, obviously those things are discussed during treatment, or if, like I said, if you need testing because you have GI issues. It's like I've had a patient that was actually allergic to broccoli and some of the cruciferous, and they actually felt better being on a very crappy diet. And that was like a test. I said, hey man, go, I don't ever tell you this, but go down and eat Taco Bell and see how you feel. And he was actually, his stomach felt better. And then we did a food sensitivity, and he was allergic to like a lot of the healthy foods. Yeah. So obviously we didn't incorporate Taco Bell into his nutrition plan, but it shows to tell you that if we have a sensitivity, the stuff that we're not technically sensitive to, it's like our body will go, okay, I know how to digest this. It's not the best for us. I don't get inflamed. And so those are things we have to put into it. But,
yeah, personal bit there is that I have my own allergies to broccoli and cucumber. So I no longer get to eat cucumbers, which is sad because I really like hummus, but
oh, I know. Yeah, hummus is good.
But I'm a high severe allergy to both those foods. I think with that transition, I mean, with protein today, I think protein is such an interesting conversation when it comes to people's diets, because I think today we think of protein as really necessary. I mean, we have a lot of athletes, we have a lot of people that are really being cognizant of their diet, eating small frequent meals or high protein rich meals, but really the protein sources today that I think a lot of people are getting are full of inappropriate fat structures, but also lacking in good nutrients for us because of the way those animals have been raised. So I think my favorite soapbox moment with all my clients, so you all get to hear this now, is that eggs being vegetarian fed. And who knows who's going to dislike me for that. But I will say that there's this hilarious post that I see randomly that scrolls around, and it's in my memories now if anybody does Facebook with their Facebook memories. But in my Facebook memories once a year, I see this cat like stalking a mouse, right? And then out of the blue, this chicken will pop over and
take that mouse.
And it's such a great reminder that, hey, chickens are not vegetarian. So if we're feeding chickens vegetarian feed, when they're supposed to scratch and have bugs and lizards and mice and, other, I mean, yes, greens as well. But what do we think that we're helping their chemical structures with, and how in turn is that protein going to affect us?
Correct.
So I like to remind my patients when I'm doing the food section of this foundation handout is be aware of where food was intended to be, or how food was intended to be taken care of. Because I think that that's obviously really important. And then of course you might not be able to eat protein as much because unfortunately, I don't know why, we talked about this the other day, organic and grass-fed, grass-finished and free range and pasture raised foods tend to be more expensive.
Yeah, correct.
But if you're getting better sources of protein, your system's going to have less inflammation overall, better chemical structure again. So just being, I think, aware of that is important. And then of course
no, go ahead.
And of course, the better you eat, the better fiber you're getting in your system. I think that you're going to just lead into better detoxification for your cells. And I think I saw something the other day that we have like 100 billion, or I don't remember how many zeros and commas, but like 100 billion, 100 trillion cells in our body that we have to take care of. And we only think about like this as being a one being concept.
Correct.
So better detox, better elimination. You're just going to start feeling better overall.
Yeah. And then real quick, back to the vegetables. So obviously the Queen 15 and Dirty Dozen. So everybody has heard about this environmental working group. So go to environmental working group, Clean 15, Dirty Dozen. So you can sit there, and if you buy the ones that are high in pesticides, please buy them organic. Otherwise, you're just unfortunately increasing the toxicity in your system.
Absolutely.
And so with protein, so same thing. So it all depends on what your goals are. It's like we always sit there and say it's like good protein structures. Same thing with beef. So everybody knows omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9. So I don't have any problems with a lot of the omega-6s, and obviously everything has to be in balance, but we have way too high omega-6 and omega-9 that is basically pro-inflammatory, and the ratio to omega-3 is less. So when a cow is fed grain, that structure goes to inflammatory in the meat, and then we eat it, and then we get inflamed. And so that's why I think there's a lot of bad myth in regards to steak or meat, those types of things. Obviously, it's like it depends on each individual situation. But, I'm a firm believer that, I'm vegan and vegetarian and stuff like that. It's like, unfortunately, it's like I do eat meat, but obviously there's a fine line between, it's like, all right, I'm going to eat the proper forms. And obviously each patient has an individual, like I said, context. If we can just show them the right ways to go ahead and eat, they'll get the better structure from it.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think that that's also why a lot of cardiologists recommend a red meat free diet because of that. Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
and so we talked about that. And then obviously it's like we're big proponents of berries and in that regard. So dark berries. So we talk about antioxidants. So they're very high in anthocyanidins. And so those things are actually a big word that just means that helps quench free radicals, as well as pomegranate juice. So there's a lovely enzyme called a PON1 enzyme that helps the body detoxify. And so if we can kind of speed that process on up a little bit, and we can do that by pomegranate juice, obviously diluting it in water.
Actually, so started eating more cherries recently. It's not a fruit that I ever ate in a consistent amount. I mean, blueberries, yeah, but strawberries, yes, but not really cherries. Growing up in Arizona, it's not always able to get in an organic standpoint, but I will tell you that my skin does not burn the way it did when I didn't eat cherries. So I have always been what I get lobster burn. So I have to be really cognizant of my sunblock. I have to be really aware of when I'm going out. I've had some horrid sunburns when I was much younger. And I will say that I am astonished at how much more my skin can tolerate the sun because I'm eating red fruits more consistently. I thought that, going with those antioxidants that support the tissue.
And so we talk about protein, obviously nuts and seeds. We can kind of cater to specific things, like if people are low in zinc, pumpkin seeds, selenium, Brazil nuts. So again, it all depends on how the person represents. If they have maybe a histamine intolerance, then maybe we have to limit the nuts or find out what's going on, in that regards. But it's obviously a good source, minus the barbecue powder they put on it. So it's usually raw, not like the good old days that I had. It's like you just stick a thing of sunflower seeds that was ranch or the hot stuff and just suck on those all day. So yes. And then what we'll talk about maybe in the future is like we do seed cycling, and obviously the nuts help control our hormones. And so that's another topic that we'll get to later, but we can actually manipulate some of the hormone structure by actually eating different types of seeds and the lignins that are in the seeds that can help us on out.
Yeah, I think we have one scheduled in the future looking at hormone imbalance and seed cycling. That should be coming up soon.
Yes. All right. So what about fish, Dr. Sundermeyer?
I know that's the hardest one for me. I feel like fish is coming to a place where, well, one, I mean, we all love sushi, right? But we're eating more farm-raised fish today than I think a lot of people realize in most restaurants and sushi houses and just anything that we're purchasing from most stores. But so I think today fish is going to be higher in our heavy metals than I think anybody is ever realizing. even wild caught fish, which is so sad to say, we're not helping our oceans very much. And there's a lot more mercury and heavy metal toxicity being present in bigger fishes like salmon and tuna. And so when we talk about fishes, we're talking about size does matter, right? The bigger the fish, the higher the burden of that fish, and that they're going to contain heavy metals and chemicals in their systems. And so as you move into bigger tuna, I mean, some tunas, I think I was watching this sushi show that some tunas can be how many thousands of pounds?
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
And I was like, that's a trip.
Charlie the tuna's on steroids.
But I mean, if you think about that creature, that fish, that tuna, right, has eaten so many other fish, and in turn, what it's an accumulation. They accumulate the environmental load that other fish had. So the smaller the fish, the more likely they're also eating either much smaller fish or plankton and algae. Right. So what sardines and mackerels tend to be really, really healthy fish. I think sardines are hard to consume, but I encourage it and I try them, and it's for sure hard, but you got to get your...
Correct. Wild Planet brand has a great one if you can find it.
That's right.
It's not the typical. We found them in California at a lovely place called Grocery Outlet. Here's a plug. But if you're in California, you
not
can
affiliated.
Not affiliated. You go to Grocery Outlet, and it's like they have a great one. But I'll give the caveat about wild caught. So a lot of times, I just read a study in regards to, yes, they do have a little bit higher, but the fish also has very high in selenium. And so selenium sometimes counteracts that other toxicity that's in the fish. So that's why we want to go ahead and have wild caught, because that, as compared to farm, toxic, but they check the selenium levels and the selenium levels are low. So they don't counteract each other. So within the meat of the fish, it's like it's higher in selenium. It helps, like I said, our body actually handle that extra toxicity, and it actually helps it on out. Still bad for us in a sense.
Well, it just also shows the nutrients of wild caught versus, kind of more farm raised.
Farm raised.
How they have that better balance to make sure that we do have some protective mechanisms to our own bodies as we consume food.
Yep.
Awesome.
And
great study.
So obviously that leads into some of the fat content. So, obviously our body, cellular structure, a myelin sheath, the phospholipid layers around our cells, our brain, all of those things are fatty acids. And so, the whole history of, let's say, nutrition, carbohydrate lobby went out, and then unfortunately bagel shops went up and disease went up, and everybody thought fat was the evil, which obviously excessive amounts or different inappropriate structures are inappropriate, but fat is not an evil in that regards. And so it's like we're a big firm believer in eating your healthy fats, just because we know that, the axons and the brain, everything like that stems from a lipid bilayer. Your hormones are made out of fat.
Yep. And so I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. So Dr. Wallace gave some really cool clinical names about our lipid and our phospholipids and our myelin sheath. And what that basically means is all of our cells have a wall. So think about the room you're sitting in right now. Think of each of that wall being made up of different types of fats, right? And it's our protective layer. Our brain is a big fat ball, if you want to think of it like that in simplest forms. It's made up a bunch of lipids or cholesterol or fat. And so, and our nerve tissue, anything, any conduction, basically, like think of an electric impulse, you turn a switch on, the light turns on. Well, in our body, that's done with a protection of a myelin sheath, which again is also made up of fat. So just some information for you all out there, so that, because Dr. Wallace has great words for sure, but we want to know that.
So now another analogy, because I wear soft contact lenses. So when a soft contact lenses dries out, obviously, like it doesn't get oxygen in and out of the contact lens. When it's nice and moist with saline, it obviously permeates, and oxygen is able to permeate through.
Right.
And the statement that Dr. Sundermeyer made is that we're made of trillions of cells. So every treatment that we do has to come down to the cellular level. How can we get oxygen in and out of the red blood cell? How can we get nutrients in and out? And how can that cell communicate with other cells? So if that phospholipid fatty layer is deficient, or it's very rigid, okay, like cement, well, stuff can't come in and out of that cell. It doesn't communicate well with other cells. And so that's where a lot of treatments sometimes fail. And that's because a lot of times it's because the foundational components are not followed through. I'm dehydrated, the cell's dehydrated. I'm not getting my vegetable content in. I don't have the micronutrients to actually help with biochemical and cofactors. I'm not eating enough fat. So what does our body have to do to make sure that we're actually still alive and breathing? And what other processes kind of get left on the wayside? And so if we can create those things every 90 to 120 days, old red blood cells are being destroyed, new ones are being built. And if we have the ingredients, we have a powerhouse red blood cell that's ready to go kick butt, take in oxygen, travel throughout the system, clean the system on out. And that's, when people start to sit there and notice that there's a difference, they start to feel better.
Well, and I also think that that's a really good point, that sometimes you're not going to feel the improvement right away, right? I mean, correct. Sometimes it can take 60 to 90 days to really know better improvement, because you have to make sure that your cells have kind of regenerated, and our whole body regenerates. I mean, I think every year we have a whole set of new cells, depending on what organ or body system we're talking about. And sometimes it does take that time. I mean, when I'm working with young women and, in their 20s, 30s, and into the 40s, and we're working on hormone balance, I say we have to give it 2 cycles. So anywhere from, 60 to, 70 days to be able to see if what we've started today will make a difference. So we talk about, being cognizant. Normally the first cycle might be even worse as we make positive changes, because your body's starting to try and attempt this shift that it's not really sure, like, oh gosh, okay, we're changing stuff. And sometimes when we're shifting, we're also doing a little detoxification. But now that your body's more apt to do that, over time, you're going to know, wow, I wake up and I feel refreshed. I'm waking up and I feel good. Or, I feel less heavy and my brain works. And I tell women sometimes, and sometimes your wit and snip will come back. You'll feel snippier and you'll be able to kind of get back at your significant others. That sarcasm comes right back.
That's one of the questions I always ask. It's like, how are you doing? Is your sarcasm back? When somebody makes a comment, are you able to bam, get right back to them? So that's when people
good banter.
So obviously we have other things, basic carbohydrates in dairy and stuff like that. So carbohydrates are not an evil. Okay, they're not. It's like I was just helping a patient out with insomnia yesterday, and then he was totally keto, and so our body needs carbohydrate. This is another biochemical process to make insulin. Insulin helps convert tryptophan to serotonin, and then you're able to sleep better. So carbohydrates are not an evil, but we obviously have people limit the carbohydrate intake because obviously insulin's resistance, sensitivity, and stuff like that. So there are good and bad carbs. Obviously Milky Way as compared to broccoli or whole wheat, minus, so hopefully you can get it from a non-glyphosate or something like that. But, we're firm believers, and it's okay to go ahead and actually incorporate carbohydrate.
Well, and I think that that's also depending on the person. I have patients that don't handle carbohydrates. I personally don't do a lot of gluten containing products very well, but I'm great with rice and corn. So the question ultimately is what works best in your system. So it's not, you cannot generalize anything in health today or in medicine, right? You can't say 100% of people will do great with this. No, that's why we do testing.
Correct. And that's, we talk about it. It's the individual of the patient that's coming in to see us, because we're actually individualized medicine. Cancer, we're going to definitely get you into ketosis and stuff like that. A guy coming off the street, hey, I want to feel better. And he's had a nutritional kind of habit for 30 years. We're not all of a sudden just going to go bam. It's like, it's okay. Let's switch out some of the unhealthier carbs for healthier carbs. Maybe glycemic index is different. How to, like I said, stack foods with fat and proteins and stuff like that.
And so depending on how you've been eating food will determine how we start the shift and how you might start a shift in your own health, right? Because of course, if you've been a carboholic and we eat our donuts and our bread and our sandwiches and our pastas and, we're still eating toast with, every single meal. I mean, we might encourage, the only change that sometimes I make with people is we're going to pull out some of this grain, especially if weight is your biggest issue, or blood sugar control or cholesterol are your biggest issues. I mean, carbohydrates will always be the first thing that we try and work with, but I don't think I've ever limited. I say, you get this
Correct.
at this extent, but
Mhm.
when people are doing, 2 sandwiches a day plus toast in the morning plus pasta in the evening, I mean,
Mhm.
we want to make sure that the nutrients are present. And in turn, obviously we need to
Mhm.
shift into that. Where are you moving? Are you moving
Mhm.
at all during the day or week, or are you sitting way too much? Which I think
Correct.
is a perfect. I think we hit it all on the
You
food
know,
area.
yeah. So perfect segue into exercise,
Hey, I'm
which is I
getting
know
good at
exactly.
this.
It's like she's
I've
awesome. I
done
don't
this
even need to
before.
be here. It's like you're going to see me start doing this out of the picture. And so, so yes, exercise. So in the simplest form, it's like, what are we doing to move? Movement is
Hmm.
life. And our sedentary lifestyles, obviously, I think a lot of people know that sedentary is like the new smoking in regards to just sitting. Our body
Yeah.
was meant to move through life, in that regard. So people go, well, why do I need to exercise? Obviously, exercise movement lubricates the joints. But a lot of times I tell people, it's like, if we can get past the point of normal breathing and our resting kind of rate,
Hmm.
obviously getting old carbon dioxide out of the system, getting, like I said, oxygen into the system, getting it further up into the brain and those
Hmm.
types of things. Because I tell people, if we're just normally breathing throughout the day, it's like those things just build on up poorly or whatever in different
Hmm.
tissues. And so obviously movement, which we talked about, if you're diabetic, we move and we start to go and really utilize the muscles, it's going to burn through basically sugars and stuff like that, and glycolysis, another fancy biochemical. So you're going to actually utilize those things on up, which is fantastic. But obviously every disease process studied, known to man, cancer, all these things are improved with exercise. Okay.
Yeah. I think an important point with that though is today's lifestyle maybe, or work lifestyle tends to be a very stagnant, where we sit. I mean,
Mhm.
I think you and I know that in our own profession is where am I in, most of the day, Monday through Friday? I am sitting at my desk and I'm on my computer. So when can you take advantage of standing up, of stretching, of walking around your office? Maybe you can take 10 minutes at lunchtime to even get a small walk in. um,
Correct.
I think when people are starting out, they think, oh, I got to get a personal trainer and I got to go to the gym and I got to be there 7 days a week for an hour. And I remind people that that's how injuries happen. If you've
Mhm.
gone from nothing to 1,000, right there, you're going to hurt your back, you're going to hurt your knees, you're going to affect your shoulders, your wrists, your elbows, depending on what
Correct.
type of exercise you're doing. So, I mean,
Mhm.
maybe a personal trainer is amazing, but where are you in this? I mean, can we get you walking 15 minutes a day? That was a compromise I made with a patient recently. We're going
Mhm.
to walk
Correct.
15 minutes a day. Like, let's just get you outside.
Mhm.
Let's get you circulating. Let's see how you feel. And she was like, my mood is improved just by
Mhm.
doing that. And now we're increasing her because she's
Mhm.
gotten used to that. She even told me, which I was so excited because we would been dealing with some pain with her, is that even her knee feels better
Correct.
after moving. She felt like the stretches
Mhm.
were helping her. So what little
Mhm.
things while you're sitting by your desk and you have 5 minutes can you do to actually shift the system a little? Can you stand up
Mhm.
tall and reach for this, the ceiling? Can you bend over just slightly and attempt to touch your toes? Like, where are you with
Yep.
that
Correct.
stretchability?
Well,
Oxygenate the tissue.
mhm. Correct. And so that leads into a perfect exercise. So my background is physical therapy. So I used to
Hmm.
obviously train people all the time in that regards. And so being a new doctor, I've sat more in the last 5 years than I have ever in my physical life in regards to being,
Hmm.
but I still move. And there's different, like I said, relief positions. One is called a Brugger relief position, which
Hmm.
actually helps the body align itself over, head over shoulders, shoulders
Right.
over hips, those types of things. So these are the things you can always go ahead and message us or email us, and we can send you some exercises to do
We might
in
try
that
and get
regards.
that on our website too. That way we can have
Yep.
some resources for you all if you're looking
Yeah.
into that. Now, of course,
And then,
anything should be make sure you're talking with a practitioner if there's any
correct,
bigger things, but
correct.
basic stretches I think are important.
Mhm. Right. And then, so with exercise, obviously, it's like if you're more pronounced in regards to, well, I've been exercising a lot and then I'm not gaining weight or I'm not losing weight. Sometimes people get so accustomed to a certain exercise, especially aerobics, The body gets
Mm-hmm.
so efficient, it actually slows down. So, a lot of times we have to tax the system, like Dr. Sundermeyer said, walking. If I have somebody and they're walking 15 minutes and they go, yeah, I'm doing this, it's really easy. Well, after every 2 minutes for 8 seconds, you're just going to
Yep.
go as fast as you can. And then back to 2 minutes of normal walking, 8 seconds as fast as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, physiologically, it taxes the system. The body has to make a response. And then the caveat with people that are ultra stressed and the cortisol levels in the tank, do not
Mm-hmm.
exercise 5, 7 days a week. Okay. So those are the things that, we can build your system back on up, get back to
Mm-hmm.
CrossFit or being in the gym all the time. But sometimes we need to tell people chill.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have some patients that were really sad when I told them that, but I was like,
Yeah.
this is the only way I think you're going to see any positive improvement. There's some really
Mm-hmm.
good articles out. If you just talk about, you type in adrenal fatigue and exercise, it talks about the biggest issues with, you're actually with adrenal fatigue, you're draining your cortisol values more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with exercise because your body thinks you're in a stressed or what's called a sympathetic state, which means your body's thinking you're about to run from a bear.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's not all about hitting the CrossFit gyms or hardcore weight training. It's about what different things, even, I mean, my favorite thing right now for people that are so stressed out is a hatha yoga class. And I take it from my own personal experience. I had a good friend, she was doing hatha yoga training and teaching. And so I was like, well, of course I'm going to go support you. So I did classes with her. And I think I felt my best when doing those classes. It was stretching, it was
Mm-hmm.
isometric contraction. So I stood there, I held a position for, 5 breaths, I think is what she was saying. And right there, I noticed I felt stronger. My posture got better. My
Mm-hmm.
knee and hip stopped hurting as much. And voila, I also had less
Oh,
stress. So,
oh.
couple things
And
to
so,
consider when you're considering your exercise
mhm.
routines. Never zero
Right.
to 1,000.
I meet someone that really knows where you're at in your health in regards
Right.
to injury, in regards to those types of things. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, it's like, there's all kinds of things regenerative you can go ahead and do in regards to helping knee joints and stuff. And then I
Absolutely.
think our final pillar is sleep. So
Is that our final
is that
one?
is that it?
I think so. We'll have
And
some
then
basic take homes, but I do
yeah,
think our final pillar is sleep.
all right.
I mean,
So
how many people sleep out there?
I know. Well, so everybody sleeps, but how many of you actually sleep all the way through? And
Or long enough?
or long enough. And so I can't tell you how many patients that obviously or clients that come on in and unfortunately they're entrepreneurs or they just feel like, I have to get everything done. And it's like they sleep for 5 hours and this is
Mm-hmm.
accumulated over 5 to 10 years. And then they finally come
Mm-hmm.
in and they're typical zonked, which anybody
Mm-hmm.
knows that word, like on a marathon, and then you reach mile 20 and then you zonk and then
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're just done. And so obviously sleep is a huge issue and it's extremely complicated, but obviously
Right.
some of the things I think that you can do is obviously getting your sleep hygiene,
Mm-hmm.
obviously try to remove electronics, get the television out of the room if you have, if
I
it's been
mean,
there for 20 years, then sometimes it
mhm.
just needs to stay. But there's different things you can do with yellow sunglasses, I do believe, that helps take
Yep.
the blue light out of the picture so it doesn't mess with your circadian rhythm.
And
And
affect your
so,
melatonin level at night. Yeah.
mhm,
So obviously sleep hygiene is about what, an hour before your goal bedtime. And the biggest thing
mhm.
with sleep, I think, is uh, a schedule. It's sad to say,